the heels of the story that ended the career of one general, Rolling Stone magazine now has explosive new allegations against another. A lieutenant colonel, the head of information operations at Camp Eggers in Kabul, says a three-star general tried to get psychological operations experts to use their skills not on the enemy, but on U.S. senators who are going to make decisions about more money and more troops for Afghanistan. Among them, John McCain, Joe Lieberman, Al Franken, Carl Levin, and our next guest. I'm joined by Senator Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, and a senior member of the Armed Services Committee. Senator, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Holmes told Rolling Stone he was pressured to use psychological tricks and propaganda on delegations like yours, traveling dignitaries, even the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen. What's your reaction?
Well, charges of this nature are very serious and disturbing, and they have to be fully investigated. I assume the Department of Defense, particularly when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is involved, will take it seriously, conduct a thorough investigation, and determine if there's any appropriate action that's necessary. From my standpoint, I've been to Afghanistan 11 times, talked to countless generals and privates and diplomats and members of our aid and State Department. So I try to get a broad view and not to put too much stake in any one position while I travel.
There are other allegations in this. I mean, besides what are, I guess, the traditional psyops that are supposed to, according to Defense Department's own guidelines, only be used on hostile foreigners. They apparently were told to put together, and did put together, according to this article, dossiers on people like you about how you voted, about sort of where your sweet spots are, that propaganda people were in the room when you were having official meetings, that they were not identified as such. Did you ever have any indication that there was someone there or something going on, anything that would have said to you this is out of the ordinary, given your vast experience?
Given the fact that I've been there numerous times, talked to several different officers that had the same job, had a standard of comparison, I was there to ask questions, to get answers, to evaluate the answers, to ask similar questions to other people with different points of view. And having grown up as a young Army officer in the Vietnam era, I have, I think, an instinctual sort of notion that you have to look very carefully and weigh very carefully what anyone says, not suggesting any impropriety. It's just that there are people with institutional stakes, people that try to advance their own position. You have to recognize that and understand that. So I didn't feel anything unusual going on, and I think that it's a result simply of trying to cast a vast net, talk to lots of people, not just in Kabul, but to go out on the ground, to talk to young battalion and company commanders, squad leaders, to get their impressions, not only American forces, but also through interpreters, Afghani forces.
If this was indeed being done, what does it tell you? I mean, there is one assessment that which shows how desperate some military leaders on the ground there are to get more help for a war that they think is fast losing the support of the American people.
Well, I believe there was a significant strategic mistake when we took our attention off Afghanistan and went to Iraq. That's why I opposed the Iraq operation, one of 22 senators to do that. And I think in the intervening years, we've lost a lot of ground. And right now, we're in a situation of trying to help that country stabilize, principally because along the Afghani-Pakistan border, there are international terrorists that continue to plot attacks against the United States, against our allies across the globe, and we cannot ignore these threats.
But would you interpret something like this as a sign of desperation?
I don't think it's a sign of desperation. I think, first of all, it has to be clearly, I think, evaluated as to what went on. What was the intent? Were there any regulations violated? If there was, there has to be suitable punishment for violations. But I think what we're trying to achieve, and I think the President stated this very clearly, is the beginning of the withdrawal of our forces, American forces, this summer. And then to have a situation where we turn that over to Afghani military forces. And one of the major pillars in the strategy is building up adequate Afghani forces. So this has to be, I think, viewed in a larger context of beginning to apply the same strategy that we did in Iraq, which is shifting the burden to the local forces, getting our forces out of that country as quickly as possible, and that, I think, is the overall strategy.
Let me ask you about Libya, if I can. Muammar
Surely.
Gaddafi was just on television via telephone blaming Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda for what's going on there, and you heard the president yesterday. He said he's prepared to use a full range of options, but he never mentioned Gaddafi by name and did not say specifically whether there would be sanctions, what else the United States might do. As you see the situation unfolding there, what can and should the U.S. role be right now?
Well, we have to join the international community to make it clear that the Gaddafi government cannot use this indiscriminate violence against its own people, and in fact, that there has to be a transition from the Gaddafi family rule.
But how do you do that? How do you send that message? Because we've been hearing it from the United Nations. We heard it yesterday from the president. Hillary Clinton's been saying it.
Well, you have to begin to think seriously and consider seriously sanctions against the government of Libya. You have to convene, I think, a Security Council. The Security Council of the United Nations has to start taking very dramatic steps. You have to make it clear that international justice will be applied to any of these violations that are being perpetrated against the people of Libya. You have to start taking much more tangible steps than we've taken so far. And I think it begins, frankly, at the United Nations Security Council.
Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, ma'am.